Now, my next guests were centre stage at the House of Lords earlier on this week. Jude Ashley, who lives near Whitchurch, helped set up the Shropshire Badger Group 30 years ago. And this week, the International Fund for Animal Welfare presented Jim and his wife Jude with a national award in recognition of their efforts to protect badgers. And they're with me in the studio this morning with the award. Hello, both. Morning.
Morning, Eric.
How was it?
It was lovely.
Was it good?
Yeah.
It was a very exciting and interesting day.
Did they give you sandwiches?
Yes.
Oh, posh sandwiches.
What, crust cut off?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Tell me how it started, Jim.
Well, it started when I moved up to Oswestry, 1987. No, 1985 I moved up to Oswestry. We moved up to Oswestry. And I met up with a great guy up there, Barry Williams, RSPCA inspector at the time. And Barry was telling me about problems of badger digging that was going on across the county. It was really troubling. The sort of things that were going on just were unacceptable. We sort of got together with a group of other people. There were various people involved. In those days, Telford Development Corporation had a ranger service. Had about half a dozen people who used to do that. And there were others as well. George Pearce, who was a farmer at the time, up at Nestcliff Way. Who was interested and keen on badgers and so on. And we all got ourselves together and decided that really there was a gaping hole in terms of knowledge and of what was going on and how to deal with it. Hence, a meeting came together over at Telford Police Station of about a dozen of us, and that was it. Shropshire Badger Group was sort of formed. We plodded about for a few months trying to sort out how it might be done. A very nice guy from Ellesmere, Robin Jago, who sadly has passed on recently, 12 months ago, became the chairman, but he was busy doing other things, and eventually they asked me if I'd chair it. And as you do with these things, yeah, okay, I'll do it for 12 months to
How long ago? How long was it?
1987.
Yes, sure. And with the aim of what then?
Well, initially, and it's still one of our main aims, of course, initially to try and combat abuse, digging, baiting. Baiting in those days was quite rife with big money being involved. They were digging badgers out in the countryside and then taking them to warehouses, old derelict warehouses, and things like that.
Why?
In the cities. Well, because then they would.
What do you get out of it?
Oh, it's a bloodlust, isn't it? They would put dogs in with the badgers, and one for one, a badger will cope with the dog, but they would injure the badgers to disable them, and then turn the dogs on them, and then they'd bet on it. Big money was.
Is that what it is?
Oh yeah, big money.
It's just a betting thing.
Well, yeah, and of course the other thing is if you have dogs, if you breed these sort of dogs, and they've got wounds on them, healed up wounds, that shows that they've been fighting with badgers, they get more money.
Trophy scars.
They're trophy scars, really? And then the dog becomes more valuable.
Really?
Yeah.
But
it's horrendous.
And any of us in our right minds can't understand what people get out of it.
No, it's a bloodlust with certain people, but they are bullies basically, and we all know what bullies are. Bullies take on people who are weaker than them, don't they? For a whole variety of reasons, and animals are weaker than these people and their dogs, and that's what they like to do.
Does it still go on?
Oh yeah.
Does it?
They even do it in empty flats in Wolverhampton and things like that.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
It's the dog fighting, cockfighting type of
mentality,
mindset. Yeah.
Still goes on.
And still goes on. Oh yeah. So we're still in.
What? Good fun.
That's what they're saying.
That's what they're saying. Oh yeah, some of them will film themselves doing it, and we've got our hands on those films over time. very brave people have infiltrated them and got their hands on those films, and they're horrendous.
Do the RSPCA get any prosecutions?
Oh yes.
Do they? They're having some success, are they?
Yes, yeah. We get involved from time to time.
Yeah.
And prosecutions are mounted, and usually we've been pretty successful over the years. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. And so say all of us.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And Jude, how did you get involved? Did he rope you into this? Or?
Yes.
No, well,
She rolled her eyes. You didn't see that. You didn't see that. You were looking at me, and she rolled her eyes.
Yes, well, she'd selected me before then, you see.
Aye.
But Eric,
Warts and all.
You can't stand by and let that sort of cruelty go on. Whatever animals involved in it, it's just, well, it turns your blood cold. I remember we ran a badger conference, didn't we? Countrywide badger conference, which was extremely successful, and we had to show some of this film because everybody was warned beforehand, but they needed to know what we were fighting against, and a lot of people just couldn't stomach it. They just had to walk out. It was that bad.
You see, genuinely, I'm not being flippant about it. I would have closed my eyes.
Yeah.
You can describe it to me, and it's bad enough. Thank you very much. I wouldn't want to see it.
No.
Because I would be very upset. It's upsetting enough hearing about it.
It is upsetting. It would upset anybody, any normal person, to see it going on. Yeah, it would.
Goodness me. And it's 30 years on, you're still doing this.
Yeah.
Still,
you got to, haven't you? You can't just abdicate and let them get on with it.
Have you made progress, do you think? I mean, you said it was still going on.
We keep catching them.
I'm not saying you can stop it, but it is still going on. I say we, in
the broader sense, we keep catching them. RSPCA are very good with some of their work that they do, and various other organisations.
Crown Prosecution Service, let them down a bit, yeah.
They're not very good at prosecuting wildlife offences. RSPCA are good because they've got people who have been in that business and they sort of specialise in it. The
Crown Prosecution Service is broad brush, isn't it?
It is, but it's a bit too easy, isn't it, to say not in the public interest, which is one of their criteria.
They don't prosecute
well. They've not had the sort of success that the RSPCA have had over the years. Thankfully, RSPCA this last year there was a move to stop them having prosecution ability, but that was eventually changed, and thankfully so, because it would have been a sad day for wildlife if the RSPCA couldn't have prosecuted. Yeah,
you concentrated on badgers, but I know, like most of us, but perhaps even more so, you are very passionate about the abuse of animals generally.
Yeah, I just don't like abuse of animals. I don't see any point in it. I don't see, I think animals deserve the sort of respect that we would expect of ourselves. And there's no reason to abuse them just because they happen to be animals. And I don't care whether that's pets, domesticated animals, farmed animals, which we know then are farmed for food and so on, or whether it's wildlife. It's just unacceptable.
So let's take the life of a cow that then would be sent to slaughter. You don't object to the slaughter bit. I'm not fully putting you into a trap here. Please don't believe I'm not for one second.
But I understand.
It's the treatment of the cow while it's on the farm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And during the slaughter as well.
And during the slaughter
as well. Yeah. No, I was. My dad worked on a farm, and I spent many years on a farm, and have some very good friends still in farming. So I'm sort of tuned into farming, if you know what I mean. And I understand what goes on, but there's still no reason to abuse them. You can treat them decently and reasonably, and then you can select them and say that 3 or 4 are going for slaughter this week.
And dispatch them humanely.
Exactly. And do it with a bit of respect. Yes.
How do you get on with your farmer friends? You said you've got a lot of friends in farming.
Good.
How do you get on with your farmer friends?
We have a few interesting discussions.
Well, you know where I'm going, don't you? When it comes to culling.
Yeah, we have a few interesting discussions.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to say I'm fortunate because the ones to talk to regularly understand the sort of the more of the detail of what's gone on over the years, and understand why I say cullings are pointless and a very expensive waste of time.
But lots of farmers say badgers cause TB in cattle.
Yeah, I know they do.
That's
But
because,
Are they wrong?
that's because they're told
absolutely.
that by the
Absolutely
NFU
wrong.
and DEFRA.
How can you tell me they're wrong? Go on, prove it.
Right. Well,
How long have you got?
yeah, how long you got?
Well, you haven't got that long. We're
You're only going till 10, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you want 40 minutes to prove this? Go on, tell me how you prove it.
Well, over the years, the badger got tangled up in this from 1971. A badger was found to have TB. A dead badger on a farm was found to have TB. And from that point on, the badger became sort of implicated. But nobody since then has ever proved the connection between TB in badgers and cattle, except in a research project where they shut up a number of calves in a pen with some badgers which had been infected with TB. And 6 months later, 3 of the calves got TB. Now, that's the sort of, but I mean, that sort of experiment is pointless.
Well, on the face of it, and I have to take what you say, because I don't know the details, so I accept what you say.
Yeah.
On the face of it, that's rubbish.
Yes, that's a good word for it.
But
yes.
it is, isn't it? If you put in badgers infected with TB in with
Calves, yeah. And
probably
force
gonna
them to
get
stay together.
TB.
It's totally alien environment for them, isn't it? Now, if you take it the other way and say what badgers do with in the wild, as it were, in their normal lifestyle, first of all, they avoid cattle. That's been proved with radio tracking. Secondly, cattle avoid them. Because they don't much like them. Just as an example, people will have seen over the years a photograph. It's been regularly published of a cow and a badger sniffing their noses at each other, and TB is an aerosol disease. And it was a blag. You know what you can do with photographs. You know, many years ago, I implanted a photograph of a car ferry on Ellesmere Mere. It's just not possible, is it? But and this was a blag. And it was produced right across the board on farming periodicals and news and so on. And it was completely false.
Photograph.
Yeah.
So over time, all this thing went on, and eventually the Krebs trial was produced in 1998. It started. Lord Krebs designed it. Proper research. This was 3 areas to be worked on. One where they culled badgers totally, another one where they culled if there'd been a TB outbreak, and another one as a proper control area where nothing was culled. And all badgers culled were examined properly, right through to the end. And out of 11,000 that were killed, 1,500 had got TB. Right, but only 166 were infectious, and that's the difference. Because you could be carrying, I could be carrying TB. I drank unpasteurised milk as a kid, and I could be carrying TB still.
Raw milk, as they called it. Yeah.
Raw milk, yeah. I could be carrying TB still. But it's not come to the surface, and it doesn't unless the host is subjected to something like stress or other illness or something like that.
So what do you conclude from the Krebs trial?
Well, the Krebs trial showed that only 0.16 of badgers in that huge trial were infectious, and they concluded that culling badgers would make no meaningful difference to a reduction in TB in cattle.
And when was this?
That was 1998,
right.
And it was supposed to be 5 years, but in between the foot and mouth outbreak came in, big outbreak across the country. So that trial was extended, and it went on until 2007. 2005. Sorry, 7 years. And that was when it finished. Now, during that trial, there was no TB testing because everything was clamped down. You couldn't walk your dog in the country, could you?
Remember?
You know?
Remember?
Yeah.
Is it that long? Is it
2007?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go
but you couldn't walk your dog and all the rest of it. So that TB testing was stopped so that you didn't have the risk of transferring foot and mouth. At the end of that, the NFU at the time, and this is where I have a problem with the way the NFU have looked at this long term. Mr. Kendall, Sir, he got knighted eventually and died not too long ago. He persuaded Tony Blair at the time to allow the purchase and transfer of whole herds of cattle across the country to fill up the big gaps that foot and mouth had caused from the slaughter of the cattle without any form of testing before they were moved. Now you've had 3 years, nearly 3 years of no testing, and then you have whole herd movement with no testing, and the TB went through the roof, and that's been the problem ever since, right? And that's why in my book you can see, if you look at, there's plenty of evidence and research done by all sorts of scientists on this, and you can see from reading all of that, if you'd got a week to read it all, you'd realise that really badgers just are a distraction.
You put forward a very convincing case. Why is it then that quite a lot of farmers don't believe that? They want badgers culled.
I think there's still a sort of a move in the farming industry to say that, we think it's probably badgers, and the answer is you kill them, and that gets rid of the problem. It doesn't actually, because TB is a lot cleverer than that as a disease. And the more recent research is showing that it will transmit in cattle slurry, and it will hold in cattle slurry for months on end, which is why we think, and there's no proof yet, but there will be, we think that the cattle, that the badgers are actually catching it from the cattle rather more than the cattle catching it from the badgers.
John in Hamwood says, John in Hamwood said, the issue is badgers defecate in the fields where the cattle are, and the cattle catch TB from that.
No proof of it.
Absolutely no proof. You've got to find a badger with TB first to pass it on.
Yeah, I mean, badgers defecate in a hole. They dig a hole and defecate in it. Now, if John has ever seen or got any knowledge of a cow that goes to a badger latrine and actually licks into the badger latrine to pick up feces, badger feces, then I would be very keen to see any evidence that he's got of that. Doesn't happen, I'm afraid. Badgers they always defecate in a latrine, and latrines tend to be tucked away under hedges and places where cattle don't generally go anyway.
So there's no need to cull badgers?
Absolutely not.
Right. What about vaccinating badgers?
Yeah, well, we're vaccinating badgers in Shropshire. We offered a free scheme to farmers in Shropshire 3 years ago, and we're vaccinating around about 40 badgers a year. Doesn't sound much, but it's better than nothing. And I think you would understand about disease control. You've as a journalist, you've seen Ebola and all these other things, and you know what happens with disease control. You isolate the disease, you then stop the movement. You don't give anywhere for the disease to go. If you can remove the potential for a host, then the disease dies out naturally through immunity. It did it's done to a great extent through with rabbits. Myxomatosis wiped them out.
Yeah, it did, didn't it?
50 years ago, wiped them out.
Yeah.
Nobody vaccinated rabbits or anything like that, but you've got rabbits about now. There's a few occasionally have mixy, but that's been achieved through immunity, and any disease is controlled by the immunity of the potential population for that disease, and what you do with vaccination is you improve the immunity, and hence vaccination.
Do you think you and farmers, not every farmer, I understand that, but do you think you and farmers who hold the opposing point of view would ever see eye to eye?
Oh, I think we do sometimes. You do? Yeah, I think we do.
But the thing is, also, Eric, if you think about it, the NFU and the DEFRA have seriously let down farmers, because if you really 100% wanted to get rid of TB in cattle, you would suggest that you would use the strongest methods that you'd got to do it. Now, they're using a method which is only 50% at the least, at the most, successful. They're still finding 16% of TB when animals go to the abattoir. Well, that's ridiculous. After all these years, they're using this failed test, and they're suggesting to farmers that it's going to be the panacea. Well, it isn't. If they would use the gamma interferon, they would find more cattle with TB, which would be a terrible blow for the farmer. But he gets compensated, right? And at least they would take the infected cattle out of the chain. Instead of that, they're getting reactors and non-reactors on the borderlines that are getting left in. Now, those cattle, it might look like to the farmer it's doing him a favour if he leaves them there, because it leaves him with the milk production. But in actual fact, they are reinfecting the herd. It's a total fallacy.
And the badger continues to be the villain of the piece.
Yes.
Yeah. When you and I were a little twinkle in our parents' eyes, or daddy's eyes, 1936, which is pre-you, isn't it? And
it is
well pre-me. Yeah. They introduced a thing called a skin test for cattle, and that was to produce a situation where farms were attested. I don't know whether you wouldn't remember it, I expect, but I remember seeing signs on farms saying attested herd, and that was the indication that farm was clear of TB.
Right.
Now that went on through the war. In about 36 it was introduced, and that scheme went on through the war. And there was an arrangement whereby they fenced off boundaries between farms they had to produce 2 yards meters in those days, a couple of yards, to stop cattle breathing on each other, and that was the start of the move to manage TB, because it was a real sod. It used to transfer from milk to people, and my sister got it. But we all drank the same milk, and me and my parents apparently didn't get it.
Back to the raw milk again, isn't it?
Yeah, back to the raw milk.
Then it got TB tested, didn't it?
They then pasteurised
it,
and that stopped it.
Yes.
That really was the big difference, right? That was 1936. 1936, your dad, my dad, would have been looking to the skies and seeing this machine going past with a 12-cylinder engine and a propeller on the front, and it was doing 300-odd mile an hour. It was called the Spitfire, wasn't it? And people would say, look at that. And since then, we moved to jet propulsion. We went to mass air travel. We went to space travel. And the other week, Jude and I sat and watched a programme where the Cassini probe was crashed into Saturn, yeah? After a 20-year journey into space, it was giving my mind something to worry about, this one, because it took 7 years for this probe to get there, and it took... they had to slingshot it around a number of planets to keep the speed up, so they could do these billions of miles to get to Saturn, right? And then it sent photographs back for 13 years, and then they crashed it, yeah?
Go on, where are you going with this with badgers?
Well, you know where I'm
progress,
going.
Aren't you?
You know where I'm going. The answer, that's the ability of the human brain to do that. And what are we testing cattle with? The same skin test that was introduced when the Spitfire was going over.
I knew that's where you were going.
Well, isn't it pathetic?
All right.
Frankly,
It's a total waste of time, isn't it?
it's pathetic.
This is Jim and Jude Ashley from the Shropshire Badger Group. Jim set this up 30 years ago. Jude got on board, and away they go. And 30 years on, it's still going. How many in the group?
160 at the moment.
Yeah.
That's one of the things from the award. I'm sorry if I'm hogging this a bit, but Jude will tell you as well. One of the things from the award is it perhaps just says that we're here to stay. You know, we did it. We started 30 years ago. We're here to stay, and the real pleasure is seeing the new people.
Oh yeah, some brilliant young people.
Indeed. Now, Jude, let's bring you in now. Come on, you're gonna have
I've done.
Have a drink.
I've had a drink.
Have a drink.
Yes.
Young people, new people, young people. Because I was going to say to you then, when you bring new people in, how old are they?
There are various ages and various interests. Extremely passionate about wildlife, all wildlife, and like us, they object strongly to anybody being cruelty to any part of it. You can't stand back, Eric, and let it happen and believe it doesn't, because it does. You know, I mean, and if somebody says, if you go down to the cull zones now, because they're culling badgers this very minute, if you go down to the cull zones and you see the wounded badger patrols going around, you talk to the people, fantastic amount of really interesting people. There's airline pilots, nurses, teachers, Joe blogs like us. They give up their time, they're half asleep on their feet because they've finished shifts. They are passionate that this should not be going on because they've looked at it and they can see the truth. Now, if you killed every single badger on this planet, you would still have TB in cattle. Cattle are now treated almost as disposable. If you've got a fuse in a machine and it blows, you get rid of the fuse and you change it. If you get a cattle that falters, it's gone. At one time, your farmer and all the farmers that we knew, they farmed cattle as cattle and they looked after them as such. I'm not saying that all farmers don't, but the thing is, cattle used to last 10 years, quite happily, 10 to 12 years. Now, 4 years. Now, doesn't that tell you something really desperate is wrong in the state of China?
But you can't say categorically, can you, that badgers are completely innocent?
No.
No, absolutely not. But
We never have said
you
that.
know, this is the age-old problem with a disease, isn't it? You know, you can't blame one child who goes to school with a sniffle for the colds that everybody else gets, because they might be getting them from somewhere else. You know what I mean? So, and that's the problem. The blame. It's easy to blame the badger, because, and right at the end of the day, you know, looking at the logic of this, it's being blamed because one badger was found with TB in 1971.
And
Initially,
the other thing about it, Eric, running around these very same fields, you've got rabbits, rats, stoats, weasels, polecats, all can get TB.
Feral cats.
Your
foxes.
farm cats. Your farm cats can get TB. So they're just polarising the badger.
Unfortunately,
if you can see any sense in it.
Frustration. I know.
Yeah.
This is BBC Radio Shropshire. Jim and Jude Ashley from the Shropshire Badger Group, and they've now been recognised, national recognition for their efforts to protect badgers in the House of Lords. Tell me about your day out.
Yeah, it was an early start. We decided we'd do it in a day. We'd got other things going on this week, over the week, so we decided we'd do it in the day.
How did it all come about in the first place? When did you find out?
Just got a phone call.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, that was
not a letter.
Got a phone call.
Right.
That was a bit of a surprise. Jude thought it was some sort of
wind up.
She
I
thought it was a wind up.
yeah.
Well, we got wound up a bit at the AGM, at our AGM earlier in the year. I knew that they'd said one or two of the people, because they're always likely to try to wind me up anyway if they get the chance. And one or two of them had said something about we ought to do something to mark the 30th anniversary of the group. Right, not mentioning the 30th anniversary of me as the chairman. And then when we got the AGM, of course, they got it all set up, hadn't they? They lined me up beautifully, you know, for all sorts of things.
So when we got this telephone
that was
call,
very
we
nice.
thought it was more of it.
We thought it had died a death, you see.
Right.
It had all finished.
So the phone rings.
The phone rings.
Hello.
Yeah. And I got this very strange phone call from this young lady she was picking, but I knew that she knew a bit more than she was letting on.
What did she say? Is that Mr. Ashley?
No,
Yes.
she said, "Is that Jim?"
Oh, Jim. Oh, first name?
Yeah.
But you didn't know her anyway.
No, I hadn't got a clue who she was.
Is that Jim?
Is that Jim? I said, yeah. She said, and is Jude there? And I'm thinking, what's going on here, you see? So Jude's sort of half listening to my half of the conversation and going, what's going on?
Oh,
you know?
My wife does that.
Yeah.
Mind you, she says I do that when she's on the phone. She keeps saying, shut up, I can't hear. Go on.
And she's thinking it's somebody from China who's trying to sell me something, I think.
So what did this woman say? Come on.
Well, she just went on a bit and said, "Are you? How are you with media? Talking to the media?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm okay. Yeah, fine. I do it fairly, quite regularly."
Are you free on the 17th?
Are you free on the 17th of October? And I'm thinking, hello, I'm being propositioned for something here, And then we got going a bit further, and then she said that she was from IFAW. Well, I know what IFAW is. International Fund for Animal Welfare. So I said, yeah. And she said, well, you've been nominated for an award, you see. So I said, oh, right, okay.
At this point, you're still wondering what's going on?
Yeah, she's still not hearing this half of the conversation. I'm getting a bit more knowledge of it now, and she's wondering what I'm doing. And don't give them the credit card numbers, Anyway, but eventually we sort of got to it, and she eventually said that could. And then was the big one. Can you? Well, that's fine. So you're free on the 17th. Yeah. Can you come to the House of Lords? And I thought, and I'm going. Can we go to the House of Lords on the 17th? I suppose so, sort of thing, And now we knew I have a slight knowledge of this award because a lady of my knowledge received one a few years ago, and I have to say I was slightly part of that. Megan Morris-Jones, who...
Oh, Megan Morris-Jones, yeah. Crime and Wildlife.
Yeah, Coup and Wildlife.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Megan received an award, a Lifetime Achievement Award, a few years back. So I sort of, once we got a bit more information, I knew what it was. And then I thought, hey, they've lined us up again. This is the continuation of the AGM stuff. So
an early start and then House of Lords.
Early start, House of Lords. Hey, nice. Once you get through security down there, as you would expect, with everything that's gone on, security is horrendous. Well, it's tight.
But it has to be, as you said.
It has to be.
So you got through and then...
Got in, found ourselves in the Chumley room, which the one guide couldn't pronounce.
Cholmondeley.
He was doing it. He was doing the Cholmondeley bit. He was a Scotsman.
Yeah.
But he couldn't pronounce that. Anyway, we did that. We got in, and then it was posh nosh, and then the presentation by Bill Oddie and Baroness Gale, who's a lady from South Wales.
Great. Where's it going to go, this trophy?
Oh, well, it's been sitting on the sideboard for the moment.
In its box, beautiful.
In its box. I brought it in the box. We thought we better add just to prove that we got it.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
And and it goes on. Badger Group goes on. Strength to strength.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll continue.
And it's only thanks to the great support we've got.
But we've got a grand bunch now. They'll be out this weekend with another badger vaccination on a farm in the county.
Sandra's just been on from Minsterley. She said she's a farmer. A couple of years ago, their cattle had to be shot because they had TB.
Yes.
She said it came to light that there were badger droppings in their feed troughs. She said it was devastating having the cattle shot. They had to go out and invest in new feed troughs that were higher off the ground.
Yeah.
She said they treat their cows with great compassion on their farm. There's no doubt about it, Sandra. Lots of farmers do, and they give them names, and they care very much about animal welfare. And most farmers do.
I mean, I want to. What I want to do is talk to farmers. I'm happy to talk to farmers. As long as there's coffee on, I'll go and talk to farmers and see whether we can help. We'll try and help with biosecurity if there's an issue there. We'll try and help with vaccination if we think that might be a potential help. But House of Lords Tuesday, Thursday afternoon, I'm in a field up in North Shropshire picking up a badger that was shot with a rifle. No doubt about it. I know what a rifle damage looks like. And that's it's still going on, Eric,
right.
Unfortunately. And I did speak to a lad the other day. We went to Mayfest, and there was a lad there came. He was a farmer's son, and he said, "But you can understand, can't you, that if we have to have a cow put down that's a good animal, and one that we've really reared up and is a real something for the future, you can understand why my dad would want to stick a couple of shells up the 12 bore and go out and shoot a badger." I said, "Yeah, I can, but it won't do any good, will it? It won't help."
Malcolm says, TB is rife in the Isle of Man, but there are no badgers on the Isle of Man.
True.
He said, "I ask you not to believe me, but prove me wrong."
Yeah.
Well, Eric,
You've heard that one before.
In Scotland...
And the Isle of Skye.
Yeah.
Yes, in Scotland, they're about to lose their TB-free status if they're not careful. And they've also got it on the Isle of Skye now. They've not got badgers, so it's come on the cattle truck.
All right. Lovely to see you both. Congratulations on the award. It's nice to have that longer conversation.
It is indeed.
It's nice to do it backwards and forward.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jim and Jude Ashley from the Shropshire Badger Group, which was set up 30 years ago. And Jim and Jude have received an award this week from the International Fund for Animal Welfare in recognition of their efforts to protect badgers.